what we can understand is India is built upon a social structure that is based on caste. Every caste is divided or characterized with their own social practices, cultural practices and traditions and norms. So out of these communities, denotified tribes are one of the most marginalized and disadvantaged communities. Why I say this? Because these tribal denotified tribes were once recognized as born criminals, or they were categorized as habitual offenders by colonial British rulers. But here the problem is individual who commits any activity that is harm to others can be called or termed as a criminal, but community as a whole may not commit any such illegal activity. And that too, the Britishers who introduced Criminal Tribes Act in 1871, they termed them as born criminal. By birth, they are criminals. How can this be? There are several arguments, and basically we can classify them into two. One is foreign scholars led argument, another is Indian scholars led arguments against this. The first, the foreign led argument was this: there are certain tribal groups particularly who practice their occupation by traveling from one place to another. For example, singers, acrobatic practitioners, priests, and pastoral communities, and traders, small who trades salt and vegetables, such essential goods. So these type of communities were regarded and classified as criminal tribes. They are not traveling without any purpose. They were traveling as part of their livelihood. Then why should they be considered or classified as criminals? If we think of British point of view, they thought that these nomadic communities were sending help to the freedom fighters. They are informing latest information to the freedom fighters. So, as a whole, British local government thought that these people are acting as informers to the local freedom fighters at that time. And because of these people, there is a threat to their local administration. This was the main reason why British rulers introduced this act. And there were other conspiracies as well, but I am not going to explain all those details. So, and this is the Indian view. Whereas the foreign scholars' view is that there are certain communities who survive basically by committing crimes, by intercepting travelers, robbing them, and sometimes killing them. There are certain communities who commit these types of crimes. Therefore, we should be curtailing them. We should prevent such activities. This was the foreign version of Indian nomadic tribal groups. However, first this act was introduced in Punjab province, then Bengal province, then western province of India, British India. Then after 41 years, or almost 40 years after introducing this Criminal Rights Act, the British rulers were introduced in southern India, and this act was remained until 1949. That means within 40 or 41 years, the communities which were recognized and classified as criminal tribes gone through drastic changes. You take their history, their culture, their language, their occupation, everything got affected. Because these after recognizing, these communities were kept in a isolated camps. We have in United Andhra Pradesh, we have several such camps. In those camps, these communities were given rigorous, transformative trainings in order to, civilize these people. They introduced many severe reforms and, certain, apart from severe, training and all that, the main benefit the communities got from these camps were education and some skills in the camp. They were imparted vocational trainings and they were given some work for their livelihood or survival. But except this, in other aspects, these communities were at receiving end. So, within 40 years, we cannot imagine that certain communities started believing that we are really born criminals. Our forefathers were really committed such crimes. So, the entire training, reformatory activities in the camps were focusing on brainwashing these communities. Why? Because if these communities can start believing that we are really coming from such backgrounds, then they will lose everything, including their self-confidence and esteem. So there were a lot of such negative impact of camps, which was run by Salvation Army, which was run by ex-army people who were combining with Christian missionaries. So under this camp, there were several restrictions. Everyone, whoever wants to go outside, they have to take permission and have to mention at what time they will return. If they violate this rule, there will be severe punishment. And a constant surveillance and monitoring of their movements are took place during this 40 years. So because of this, the communities were started believing that we really belong to such groups. But crime cannot be committed by birth. Crime cannot be committed by a community as a whole. Crime can be committed by individuals due to certain problems. So, however, the act was repealed in 1949 and in its place there was a Habitual Offenders Act 1952, and according to this act, all these criminal tribes are denotified from Criminal Tribes Act. But however, most of the features of Criminal Tribes Act were remained intact even in the Indian introduced Habitual Offenders Act. Therefore, the particularly Home Department and Police Department try to always monitor these communities. And how many denotified and nomadic tribal communities we have in India? So far, Government of India
500.
appointed two commissions. One was appointed in 2008. The commission was headed by Balakrishna Renke, which identified more than 1400 denotified tribes, nomadic tribes and semi-nomadic tribes. After that, in 2014-15, government again appointed another committee called Bhikkhu Ramji Aidate, and the commission identified that there were more than 1530 denotified nomadic and semi-nomadic tribal communities in India, out of which there were 1262 communities were classified into various reservation categories. Those after denotification from Criminal Tribes Act in 1952, these communities were placed in various reservation categories, and majority of the denotified tribes were placed in OBC reservation categories, and a modest number of such communities were placed in SC and ST categories. However, the commission identified that there were more than 260 or 68 to 69 communities were not even recognized, not even classified of any of these communities like SC, ST, OBC. That means they are equivalent to open category. They are like general category. But their socio-economic condition is so worse that even we can't compare with SC/ST's social and economic conditions. So this is about at India level, but when we come to state level, particularly United Andhra Pradesh, Renke Commission was identified 59 to 60 denotified and nomadic communities, whereas Bhikkhu Ramji Aidate Commission identified 63 to 64. And both the commissions have, in some cases listed double. In Andhra Pradesh, one community is called Mandula, but in Telangana region, that community will be called with some different name. So such corrections were not made in the second commission. Why I am mentioning second commission? Because the mandate of the second commission was to correct this ambiguity, correct this community's name, and remove all the mismatches and give a clear-cut list so that government can identify them and place them in a specific reservation category based on their socio-economic and historical background. But the commission again gave similar confused list. So problem is still remaining. Therefore, even in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, most of these communities were existing. whatever communities are there in current Andhra Pradesh, similar communities also there in Telangana. But in order to give a particular, and accurate list, the commission and given some responsibility to Anthropological Survey of India to identify and give a perfect list of denotified nomadic and semi-nomadic communities. As per this latest commission, they mentioned that there were not a single semi-nomadic tribal communities in Andhra Pradesh. So, majority of, as I mentioned, majority of the communities were placed in OBC, particularly in OBC A list, where they are allocated 7% of reservation. However, due to their poor and illiteracy and lack of skills and awareness, they are unable to avail most of the government welfare benefits. So they are lagging much behind than the other OBC communities. So this is on the whole. I gave a brief account of denotified and nomadic tribal communities. Now I will give some results from my studies, my research studies. I have done so far two major projects. One is in 2015, both in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, and another one was in 2024, exclusively conducted in Telangana. So based on this study, I want to present how gender equations prevail among denotified and nomadic tribal communities. Whether the female were given priority or they were restricted. So, in terms of gender, I am trying to give some field-based results. So, this study was done in 2004 in 5 districts of Telangana, 6 districts of Telangana and 6 communities. The study was selected based on purposive sampling and purposive sampling. However, the study applied both quantitative and qualitative. That means we have applied mixed methods in order to capture the reality of denotified and nomadic tribal communities of Telangana. So based on our study, which focused on gender, labor division and women's autonomy in D&T households, focusing on family responsibilities, economic roles and empowerment within the households as well as within their own communities. So I am presenting prime and main results that are related to women and labor. In terms of giving some gender aspect, I am giving these results, but there are several other important findings which I am not going to discuss here. So the study found that on the whole 52% of female population exists among the sample communities. That means in a larger context, if we see male population would be greater than female population in general context. But when we come to denotified tribal communities, female population is much higher than male population. why we can discuss in the coming slides. The another important finding was that the working age population is greater than non-working population. Most of the age among the denotified tribal communities were engaged in various types of activities. What are those activities? We will discuss. As I mentioned in the beginning, women's participation is very active among DMT tribal communities, and their participation in various kinds of economic activity is almost equal to their men counterparts. That means they are equally engaging in various economic activities and deriving income in order to supplement their family income. And out of 6 tribal, denotified tribal communities, this activeness was found more among 3 communities. They are Domara, Italolu and Gudubukala communities. And in the remaining 3 communities, they are actively engaging, but their proportion is somewhat lesser than these communities. What about their education? The literacy level among these communities were less than 50%. It is around 40%. And that too, the enrollment level is higher at primary level and upper primary level. After that, the dropout rate will drastically increase. So the college going students and girls are very less from these communities. Because of this, there are very few who can sensitize their community people. However, there are 47% of households still practicing their caste-based occupation. In the beginning, I mentioned that these communities are based on, live based on their caste-based occupations like singing, storytelling, and providing, herbal medicines, telling astronomy, and alms seeking, particularly during festival season. So we are all aware of these communities because we can observe them seeing during festival period. So that means after denotification from Criminal Tribes Act, which is almost 80 to 81 years, still close to 50% of these communities are still relying on their caste-based traditional occupations for their own survival. It has not come down. It has come up to 50%, but remaining 50% still there. And when we talk about the working nature across gender, then we observe that women are mostly participating in traditional occupations, whereas females are diversifying their economic activities into non-traditional occupations. Like men, they go to different places. For example, they travel 1 week, 2 weeks, sometimes 1 month and 3 months. There are certain communities whose men travel 3 months across the state and come back. In this period, their female members engage in non-traditional activities like selling cosmetic goods or materials, selling plastic items, and collecting hair and collecting the hair, and based on that they survive. However, these women are mostly in street vending. All these activities, if we club them into at a broader level, they come under street vendors category or petty traders. So, and some communities also engage in labor. The communities that are located in rural areas also engage in agricultural labor and non-agriculture construction works. But if communities are residing in urban areas, they are not into labor activities but into street vending and petty trade. However, the daily income from these activities they gain or earn is much less. They start their activity early in the morning and try to continue evening, and per day they earn below 500, and per annum it is less than 50,000. So because of these practicing of traditional occupations as well as very minuscule and less respected activities, they are treated differently. They are discriminated for two reasons. One is the activities they are involved in, and second one is the ex-criminal tribes tag. These communities were called as denotified tribes, which is connected to earlier Criminal Tribes Act. Because of these reasons, they are still facing discrimination and stigma. Despite facing these many problems, the majority of the households inform that they still want to continue their traditional occupation. And why they want to continue their traditional occupation? Because there are no other alternatives. Whatever alternatives are available for these communities, those are street vending and petty trade. And sometimes these communities, not sometimes, on every day, on particular time, their children and elderly people, early in the morning and sometime in the evening, they go to different households and seek alms, including food. So when they are into this type of activities, they get disrespected and mistreated. But still they want to continue. Why? Because there are no other better alternatives for these communities. However, there are certain communities who are transforming or diversifying their occupations.